Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking on something pretty fascinating, but let's be honest, also really unsettling.
Yeah,
We're
definitely.
going to try and get inside the head of, well, one of history's most notorious figures, exploring ideas that feel strangely relevant right now.
That's right. We're diving into Ted Kaczynski's technological slavery, and we're looking at it mainly through Clifford Lee Sargent's critical review,
hmm
from the Better Than Food YouTube channel.
Okay, and we need to be absolutely crystal clear right up front. This deep dive, it is not an endorsement of violence, not at all, or Kaczynski's action.
No, absolutely not.
Our goal here is really to rigorously unpack the arguments he made. They're complex, they're provocative, and we want to see how they connect or maybe really clash with how we think today.
Yeah, what is it about this work that grabs people intellectually?
Yeah.
Even though the conclusions he reached are so dangerous.
And it's worth mentioning, this isn't just about the manifesto everyone knows, right? The one from 95.
Right. Industrial Society and Its Future, yeah, that was published under duress. But the book we're focusing on, Technological Slavery from 2022, it includes more. Extra letters, other writings. It really expands on his, frankly, pretty bleak view of the modern world.
Okay, so let's try and unpack this. The big question is, what can we actually learn here? I mean, the solutions he offered are obviously deeply flawed, terrifying even, but
Yeah.
did he maybe pinpoint some real problems we're still grappling with?
Well, his core argument, the foundation of it all, is pretty stark. He basically says that technological progress and human freedom, they just can't exist together.
Yeah.
They're mutually exclusive in his view.
So as technology advances,
We become more controlled, more dependent. That's the core idea.
and he has this idea of the system, right? That's the enemy. How does he describe that? Sargent talks about this.
Yeah, the system. That's his term for the whole industrial technological society. He sees it as the absolute root cause of, well, almost everything bad.
Yeah.
Psychological suffering, feeling alienated, destroying the environment. It all comes back to the system.
It's this big, pervasive thing undermining us.
Exactly. Insidious, he'd probably say.
Okay, and then there's this key concept, the power process. Can you break that down? What did he mean by that?
Right, the power process. This is, central to his whole theory. Kaczynski argues that humans have this fundamental need. We need goals, okay? But not just any goals.
Okay.
We need goals we can actually achieve through our own meaningful effort, autonomously. Real work, real results that matter to us.
And his critique is that modern life messes this up somehow.
Completely. He argues it systematically erodes the power process. This is maybe, one of his most resonant points for some people,
Yeah.
even if they reject everything else. He really tapped into a feeling that maybe our modern lives, despite all the stuff we have, lack agency, real meaning.
How does he say it gets eroded through surrogate activities? Is that the term?
Exactly. Surrogate activities, things like, our jobs, maybe hobbies, even academic work sometimes. He argues these things just simulate fulfillment.
Accumulate it.
Yeah, they give you a temporary feeling of achievement, maybe. But it's not the real deal.
Yeah.
It doesn't have genuine consequence or lead to that deep sense of purpose that comes from, meeting fundamental needs through your own efforts.
Wow. Okay, so if that's the diagnosis, the disease is modern society eroding our purpose. What's
Well-
the cure he proposes? I know it's extreme.
Oh, it's beyond extreme. It's incredibly radical. His solution isn't reform. It's not tweaking the system. It's total destruction
Total destruction
of the entire techno-industrial system.
Yeah.
He advocated for an abrupt, violent global collapse.
Yeah.
He genuinely saw no other way to get back what he considered true freedom.
It's, hard to even grasp.
What's kind of chilling, though, is the precision in his diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
Even if the cure is unthinkable. He identifies this potential loss of human agency, and it forces you to ask, well, does all our convenience have a hidden cost? Are we trading control for comfort?
That leads into something else Sargent brings up, which I found really interesting. He compares technological slavery to Freud's civilization and its discontents. That seems like an odd pairing at first glance.
It does, yeah, but it's quite insightful.
No.
You've got Kaczynski and Freud, totally different eras, backgrounds, everything. But they both kind of conclude that modern society is fundamentally at odds with human nature.
How so? What's the connection and the difference?
Well, Freud's idea basically was that civilization forces us to suppress our instincts,
Right.
and that suppression leads to guilt neurosis, this constant internal battle.
Okay.
Kaczynski sees a similar conflict, but blames technology. He says technology suppresses our autonomy, our authentic purpose, and that's what leads to psychological breakdown.
So the common thread is civilization or technological society creates this deep inner conflict in people.
Exactly. That's the shared ground. But then they diverge massively.
Because Freud basically says, well, this is the price of civilization and doesn't really offer a way out.
Right. He doesn't offer a solution. Kaczynski, on the other hand, he offers a solution, but it's, utter destruction.
Okay, this is all tying together. So building on that idea of inner conflict, Kaczynski talks about oversocialization. How does that fit in? He connects it to guilt.
Yeah, he sees oversocialization as sort of this internalized guilt mechanism, almost like Freud's superego, but maybe more focused on societal norms. And this is where he gets really controversial, launching this attack on what he calls modern leftism.
Ah, right. What's his argument there?
He claims that people on the left are particularly prone to this oversocialization, that they suffer from emotional instability and deep down are actually loyal to the very system they claim to oppose.
So they can't be truly revolutionary in his eyes.
Basically, yeah. He critiques both left and right, but he sees the left, particularly the activists of his time, as a direct obstacle to the kind of anti-tech revolution he envisioned because they're too tied into the system's values, like guilt and conformity.
And Sargent points out a pretty deep irony in all that, doesn't he?
He does. Sargent notes that Kaczynski's intense criticism, his almost obsessive need to control the narrative and the direction of any potential revolution. It kind of mirrors the exact same need for control that Kaczynski himself is railing against in the system and in others.
It's like a psychological projection, almost.
It could be interpreted that way, yeah. His own internal struggles reflected outward.
Okay, let's shift to Sargent's critique of the work itself. He finds some major holes, right? Logical gaps.
Oh, definitely. One of the biggest, and Sargent really hammers this, is the lack of any real plan for after the revolution. It's completely vague.
Right, just destroy everything. And then what does Sargent say about that vagueness, especially about technology just coming back?
Kaczynski offers literally no roadmap. Zero. The system collapses and freedom. He seems to imagine this return to a pre-industrial primitive state. But he gives absolutely no thought to how you'd stop technology from just re-emerging. Humans innovate, right?
You can't just turn that off.
Exactly. And this leads Sargent to what he calls the paradox of freedom. Kaczynski wants to achieve freedom by removing technological tools. But Sargent argues that would just create a different kind of tyranny.
The tyranny of primitivism.
Yeah, a society where you're forced not to innovate, forced into this rigid, simple existence. Which raises that question Sargent poses. Is it really freedom if it demands its own kind of strict conformity, even if it's conformity to a natural state?
And Sargent also circles back to the psychological angle, suggesting that maybe the book reflects Kaczynski's own issues.
Yes, he suggests that the intense rage, the feeling of alienation, the compulsive need for control that you see in the writing, it might be less about pure philosophy and more a reflection of Kaczynski's own deep-seated psychological struggles.
Makes you wonder how much is the argument and how much is the person.
It's a valid question when the proposed solutions are so extreme.
Okay, now for that detail, it's just wild. The linguistic clue that helped catch him, it came down to grammar.
Isn't that incredible? His obsessive precision with language. Specifically, his use of the phrase, "you can't eat your cake and have it too."
Which is technically the correct older form, right? Most people say have your cake and eat it too.
Exactly. He used the rarer but grammatically proper version consistently, and it appeared in the manifesto and in personal letters his brother eventually turned over. It was like a linguistic fingerprint.
Wow, so the very meticulousness he valued, his intellectual precision,
became a key piece of evidence. It's deeply ironic, isn't it? His attempt to critique and escape the system's control was ultimately traced by the system, using the patterns within his own rigorous thinking.
What a detail. Okay, but stepping back. Despite the flaws, despite the horrifying actions, a lot of the fears Kaczynski expressed, they do feel kind of relevant today, don't they?
They really do.
Yeah.
Eerily so sometimes. You look around, increasing AI control, worries about machine intelligence, massive surveillance systems, environmental crises looming, rising rates of anxiety and depression linked to modern life.
Things he was writing about decades ago.
Yeah. It's hard to ignore that some of his diagnoses seem prescient.
And this is the critical point Sargent makes, just because he correctly identified some symptoms doesn't mean his cure wasn't poison.
Absolutely crucial distinction. You can acknowledge the accuracy of some observations about the problems in society without ever endorsing the violent, destructive path he advocated. It's vital to separate the diagnosis from the prescription.
Connecting that to the bigger picture, it really underscores how important it is to find constructive solutions, not just rage against the machine, literally.
Precisely. Identifying problems is one thing. Finding workable, humane solutions is another challenge entirely.
Sargent uses a really memorable, kind of funny analogy from South Park to critique Kaczynski's plan, right? The underpants gnomes.
Yeah, the underpants gnomes logic. It's perfect. Step 1, destroy the industrial system. Step 2. Step 3, freedom.
That missing step 2 is kind of a big deal.
It's everything. Sargent even jokes about, like, a post-collapse world with TED checks to make sure nobody's secretly inventing things or, God forbid, making coffee. It paints a picture of a really bleak, regressive future.
Ultimately, Sargent sees it as an anti-human vision.
Yeah, despite all the intellectual complexity, he argues Kaczynski's vision isn't about liberating humanity, it's almost against it. It's about forcing humanity into a rigid, predetermined, primitive box.
So, wrapping up, technological slavery is definitely provocative, intellectually stimulating in places, and yes, uncomfortably prescient in some of its diagnoses of modern problems.
No doubt about that. Kaczynski might have been sharp in seeing some of the issues.
But dangerously, catastrophically wrong in his prescription.
Completely. Sargent's final take is powerful.
Yeah.
It's less a blueprint for freedom and more, as he puts it, a manifesto of revenge.
And studying works like this, understanding where these radical ideas come from, is important.
It is. We need to understand the psychology, the philosophy behind radicalism.
But, and this is the key takeaway we have, to resist the destructive conclusions. Maybe real freedom isn't found in blowing everything up or retreating to some imagined past. Maybe it's in thoughtful reform, critical thinking, trying to find genuine self-awareness within these complex systems we live in.
Finding a path forward, not backward.
So, a final thought to leave you with. What do you think is the biggest challenge we face in navigating this increasingly technological world without falling into either Kaczynski's extreme rejection or maybe passively accepting whatever comes next?